Hi, I'm Charlie Melcher, and I'm the founder of the Future of Storytelling Summit. I'd like to welcome you to today's Future of Storytelling Speaker Series, the first one of the new year. This series and the summit itself are devoted to helping people better understand how storytelling, in the broadest sense of the word, is evolving in the digital age. Through the power of Google+ Hangouts, we bring our summit speakers back to lead weekly roundtable conversations in this open forum. For a full list of speakers coming up in future weeks, please visit our website, futureofstorytelling.org. And we encourage you to join today's conversation by sharing your questions. Tweet us at FoST.org, F-O-S-T-O-R-G, or post your questions into the Q&A within this Hangout. We're very honored to have with us today Dr. Paul Zak. Paul is one of the leading experts in the field of neuroeconomics, which studies the neurochemical roots of human decision-making. He's also the director of the Center of Neuroeconomics Studies at Claremont Graduate University and the author of the book, The Moral Molecule. Hi, Paul. Welcome.
Hey, Charlie. Great to be back with you.
So glad to have you here. I just want to say, Paul, you have been one of the highlights of the FoST Summit and have been somebody in one way or another who's been at the summit for all of the last 3 years, either in body or virtually there. So I really think of you as kind of one of the founding members of our community. So thank you again for joining us today.
Well, I love this, and just to make a little plug for the summit, gosh, you know, it's like this giant mind-expanding experience, even for the speakers. There are so many interesting creative people there. So I learn much more than I give out to other people. So it's just a wonderful opportunity, and I hope it continues to grow.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, so let's start today's conversation by my asking you a little bit about the work you're doing now, the new work you're doing in your lab. Can you tell us a bit about it?
So we've been working in the last couple of years to quantify story impact. Okay, so what does that mean? So we don't want to rely on self-report. So if I ask you, Charlie, why you like chocolate ice cream more than vanilla, you'll give me some kind of BS answer about something, and if I push you further, you'll say, well, gosh, probably when I was a kid I ate chocolate. I don't know. You don't know, right? It's complicated, right? Liking is a complicated thing, but liking translates into market impact, and in some sense, we all have to get paid eventually, right? So what we really want to know is why stories move us, and then if we can understand that, then we can have a greater impact on the market, engage people more, encourage them to purchase books or products or whatever. So what we have done in the lab in the last couple of years is to measure neurologic activity up to 1,000 times a second while people listen to or watch a variety of different stories, from videos to audio to print, collect data, and then use a bunch of algorithms we developed to then predict the engagement of that story and to quantify it. So, this is not science replacing art. This is using science to kind of inform the art. So if this, instead of saying, I kind of like this one, but this one's a little bit better, we can say, well, this story, this 2-minute story is a 7, and this one's a 14. So the 14 is twice as engaging as the 7. So I can talk more about how we've done that. But I think that's been a really valuable tool that we've developed, because now when we work with creative people, we can give them much clearer advice on why the story works, and we can map out, again, second by second, where the story goes right or goes wrong. So I can give some specific examples of that, but I think that's the most important thing. And we can go back to the underlying neurochemistry and what's going on. So anyway, that's the opening salvo.
Well, I mean, that's incredible. And obviously, as a storyteller and one who has many storytelling friends, the possibility that you could help us really hone our craft through this type of science is honestly almost too good to believe. So let me ask you, tell us a little bit how you do that. What exactly are the metrics? How do you get to a number that represents engagement?
Right. So this is, again, based on 5 or 6 years worth of research. I guess we first published this work starting in 2009. So lots of experiments. Some of this was funded by your tax revenues. So spend $1 million of your tax money doing this. So spent a lot of time working with particularly the U.S. government on helping them be better communicators. And so even though we worked in this area before the government funded us, and we're not currently getting any government funding for this, we're continuing to work in this area. The notion was, could you design a neurologic test bed in which you could take, say, 10 versions of a story and identify which ones are the most engaging, number one, and what point are they engaging, and for whom are they most engaging, right? So that's another issue, the sort of targeting issue that we've worked on. So we began back in the early 2000s by just looking at the kinds of signals that motivated individuals, brain signals that motivated individuals to donate after watching a public service announcement. So we used a variety of public service announcements, and the reason we use those is because we can get a direct behavioral measure of impact, right? So I have to ask you about liking, about, you know, why don't you like puppies enough? I mean, who knows? I can actually just see this PSA was effective because we paid you a little bit of money for being the experiment, and now you actually donated some of this money to the cause, right? So now we have an objective measure of impact, and so we've used that same technique to refine these algorithms. So what we do now is, so we originally did this by taking blood from people, by infusing things like oxytocin that made people more sensitive to social information, and we then translated that into a set of signals that we can pick up by putting sensors on the torso and the fingers, and now we can actually collect this information at 1,000 times a second. So the difficulty of this approach, you know, all the cards on the table, the difficulty is that most of what your brain's doing right now, Charlie, is keeping you upright, keeping you breathing, your heart pumping, and almost none of that has to do with our conversation. Yeah, he's out. so you're getting, you know, this much data. They can't see the screen, and there's a teeny little thread of that is relevant to our conversation and how engaged you are. So it took a lot of work to actually take this terabytes of data and actually extract out those little threads, and then use those to predict at first donation impact, and then later on market impact of things like advertising. So once we had those algorithms, then we tested that on not just really wonderful stories, but really crappy stories too. And there's a wonderful database of high variance quality of stories, and we use StoryCorps, this wonderful NPR program, because they're first-person stories, they're lightly edited, and some are really fabulous and just grab you, and some are, you know, not so great. And maybe an interesting topic, but they're not crafted in a way that a professional would say, oh, this is a great story arc that keeps me engaged. Okay, so bottom line, what do we know about this stuff? We know a couple interesting things that are useful. One is that if a story does not grab your attention, it's not going to have this set of engagement signals happening to you. So not big news at all to storytellers. I need to actually keep your attention, and attention is a scarce resource in the brain. And so if I don't grab your attention, in particular in the first 15 seconds we found, and then sustain that attention during the course of the story, then the story's not gonna, it's gonna kind of fall flat. So I can give you again examples of that. The caveat on attention is that attention, unlike the sort of Freytag triangle story arc, it's not straight up in a straight line. We always are modulating our attention in and out from the thing that we really care about to our ambient environment, noise, the sirens going by. And so when we look at this neurologic data, we'll see a little kind of sine wave activity, right? So I'm kind of, my attention is wandering in and out. So attention is the kind of necessary condition that I need to have an engaging story, but it's not sufficient to generate story impact. And the sufficient condition is emotional resonance. And so we showed that emotional resonance is driven by the sense of empathy for the characters in the story. And when that occurs, we see the brain synthesizing oxytocin. So oxytocin is this brain chemical that makes us care about others, trust others, have this sense of enhanced empathy. And we can actually track the oxytocin from the brain down into the vagus nerve and into the heart. And there are receptors for this that change the rhythms of the heart, and we can measure those with sensors. And so that's a predictive component of story impact, both from a donation perspective for public service announcements, and now we found for market impact of things like advertising. So,
So,
go
so
ahead.
are you saying that if you have a more emotionally resonant story where you have empathy for the characters, that translates to more willingness to buy a product, for example?
Bingo, perfect. And you know, this sounds easy, right? I can tell lots of stories in which I have empathy for the characters. You know this apocryphal thing about Hemingway, the world's shortest effective story, right? So,
Right.
you know, it could be in 6 words. So, should we just do it for the people who
Sure,
don't know
sure,
this?
sure.
Okay, so the apocryphal story is that someone asked Ernest Hemingway, could you do an effective one-sentence story that has all the aspects of a story? And this is what he claimed to have said, or people claim he said, which is, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Right? So 6 words, has a perfect story arc, concludes, has an emotional power, um, you know, kind of compelling. You're filling in all the blanks. Okay, so that story arc is important, again, because the brain wants to save resources by not attending to stuff that doesn't seem relevant to me, number one. And number two, it doesn't want to spend resources synthesizing oxytocin, which is costly, having you feel empathy, unless there's a reason to. So this is why we want stories with conflict, right? Stories with something happening. When we create those stories in which I capture your attention and I have conflict, then I'm likely to have this sense of connection, care, you know, sometimes tears, sometimes laughter, where I'm actually emotionally engaged in that story. And then this is the crazy, weird neuroscience part. Because we have these sort of lazy brains that are highly social, once we watch the story, say, and we get engaged in it emotionally, it's as if our brains say, oh, apparently the humans are fill in the blank, donating to care for sick dogs now. So I guess, you know, I'm a human, I should be doing that too. So we have this carryover period in which if you have sufficient emotional resonance, then you want to do what the characters in the story are doing. You begin to inhabit their emotions. So to wrap up, this is like watching the James Bond movie, and as he's dodging bullets, your palms are sweating, right? You're actually, you know, vicariously, in some sense, not even vicariously, you're actually inhabiting those emotions yourself, and that's why it's such a good story, and that's why we enjoy it so much.
So, okay, so first let me just picture how this works. You have somebody in your lab and there's a series of sensors hooked up to them? Is
Correct,
that
wireless.
correct? And then you're showing them all different types of things now, right? All different kinds of stories, from
Correct.
pleas for donations to advertisements to StoryCorps
StoryCorps, right.
stories.
So we get a baseline because everybody's different. So we have you look at an X on the screen for 3 minutes, and we get this baseline physiologic information. Yeah, and then we hit you with a 15-second, 30-second, 2-minute, 5-minute story and collect that neurologic data.
And so I also just been having these conversations recently with people in different industries about the changing metrics for understanding people's attention. And you know, it used to be the box on the TV, and you would hit a button when you were watching the show, and that was that was the data for whether somebody was engaged. And you're now saying that this goes way beyond any of the other kinds of metrics that we've used, way beyond asking people what they watch or what their response to what they're watching, because you're actually working on a physiological level. You might have better insight into what's moving them than they do.
Correct. It's very hard to articulate these processes that are in old parts of the brain that are not in the sort of the newer areas associated with consciousness. So more than that, we can actually plot out second by second, oh, here's where we really got you. Here's where it didn't work. So can I give a concrete example?
Please.
Or do you want to ask some more questions?
No, a concrete
Okay.
example helps.
All right. So January 2014, 3 days after the Super Bowl, we had 16 people get wired up and watch the top-rated Super Bowl ads using USA Today ratings. About 5,000 people rate them. They watch them in random order. So the number one rated Super Bowl commercial last year was the Budweiser ad called Puppy Love. So it starts out with a little puppy. He's nuzzling a Clydesdale. Okay, so what happens in the data is you're looking at an X first before the video starts, so you get a little spike because something's happening now. So now you're going to pay attention. You know, your screen flickered. So there's a spike, and then within about 5 seconds, you know exactly, that's an iconic image, right, for Budweiser. And we just see it, the attentional just drop, 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 and it stays low, and there's almost no emotional engagement in that ad. Even though there's a kind of a weak story arc, the puppy gets away, and the guy finally adopts him from the puppy shelter. You haven't been able to sustain attention in that first 15 seconds, which we find is really critical for impact. So I'm going to contrast that with an ad we also tested the same period, in which it was for Doritos, and the ad is called Cowboy Kid. People can Google this later and watch it on YouTube. So on Cowboy Kid, by the way, this was developed not by an agency, but was developed. Frito-Lay actually had this. Remember this? They had this contest for people to suggest commercials for the Super Bowl, and this is one of the two I think that people voted on that was chosen for the contest. So this is two little boys playing cowboys and cowboys, and there's a good boy and a bad boy. Mom drives up with groceries, says, "Please help me unload," and the bad boy pushes the good boy down when she tells him that whoever helps her unload the groceries will get Doritos. And then the good boy gets up, jumps on this giant Great Dane, lassos the bad boy, and goes helps mom and gets the Doritos. And anyway, so classic story arc. We have archetypes, good and bad characters. We have attention. Will the good boy actually win? Is the bad boy going to win? How can that happen? That's not a good thing. And mom's watching, right? So we're part of that story arc. And then the implication is clear. If you're a good person, you help mom, you get Doritos. That's great. So for that ad, that was in the kind of the middle of the pack. It was number 5 or 6 in the top 10 ranking by USA Today readers, but neurologically killed. It was the best ad because it had that arc in which I sustained attention. Hey, what's happening here? There's a kid riding a giant dog. What's that about? Now or someone's getting tied up, right? So it requires the storyteller to let out the information a little bit at a time so that I can sustain that attention. Don't blow it all in the beginning, nor do we find that stories that take a long time to develop, a minute or two, people don't have the patience, their brains want to switch out. So I've got to have this delicate balance where I really need to kind of grab you but not give away the store initially, and then develop some kind of character conflict where now I care about this. And even though people reported, oh, I love the puppy ad, their brains just didn't do it. So now we're in this interesting space in which we don't know what we like. We don't know why we like chocolate ice cream. And worse than that, I think, gosh, puppies, who doesn't like puppies? I love puppies, right? That's got to be the best ad. So again, I don't know what the market impact of these were at all, but from a neurologic perspective, we have found a strong mapping between neurologically engaging ads and their market impact. And market impact is a very messy measure, but we can talk about how you might measure that. So it seems like, again, we're in this sort of herd behavior. It's a kind of a monkey see, monkey do. Apparently, the monkeys are buying Doritos, so I guess I'm going to buy Doritos.
So let's talk about the implications for this in storytelling outside of advertising. Let's say I'm working on a film. Could I actually play different edits of the film and get different responses? Do you think it will end up being used in that kind of scenario?
That's what we're moving towards, is actually working earlier on in the creative process so that you could look at a bunch of different edits of a particular story and identify the ones that are most engaging. So there's sort of two levels of engagement, and this is where the art and science have to reinforce each other. One is that we can measure, for however long that story is, overall average engagement. And we can also measure it second by second. So engagement is essentially attention plus emotion. Not exactly, because there's a little nonlinearity in there, but it's close enough. Let's think of that as attention plus emotion. You might want your story to be overall highly engaging, and that's what we find that overall for ads, the overall highly engaging ad is the one that predicts sales. But you also might want to know, second by second, does this version give me a bigger spike in engagement versus this version at second 42? Let me give you another concrete example. So an ad we looked at recently was an ad for Guinness beer and it's called the Barnes Sisters. The Barnes Sisters are Olympic biathletes, and they're twins. And it's a very interesting ad because there's almost no movement. So it's a black and white picture of these two women with sort of skis next to them, right? Biathlon is a Winter Olympics thing. And they're clearly twins. And there's a sign below the first one that says, I forget their names, Amber Barnes, born April 7th, 1972. Jessica Barnes, born April 7th, 1972. And it goes back and forth. Qualified for the Olympics, qualified for the Olympics, didn't medal, trained extra hard, requalified for the Olympics, requalified the Olympics, was too ill to requalify. Oh, now I'm generating tension. This is interesting. And then it says, gave up her position for her sister to compete. And then everything pauses. And it says, compete in the Olympics, or will be competing in the Olympics. This is an ad for Visa, by the way. Oh, no, it was Guinness, sorry. We'll compete in the Olympics. We'll be cheering for her sister. And so very little music in this. Again, the black and white picture is still, the only thing that's changing is text. And we see is that when there's a little pause in the version of the text and it says, gave up her position for her sister, man, that engagement curve spikes like crazy, right? And then it also ends on a nice high note. So I don't know who made this ad. It was brilliant. It was just a brilliant ad, whatever agency is working with Guinness. But, it was really, really well done. And I think that tells us that I could do 3 different cuts of that and compare, at that peak, is it good? And overall, does it really get me? I could add music. I could subtract music. I could make the picture color instead of black and white. So I think we're in the world of really doing A/B testing with objective measures of impact as opposed to focus groups or what my creative group thinks. And so that's pretty exciting because now you can be part of that creative process. Again, we can't replace it. I don't know, anyway, I mean, I could give you some general, we talked about before we got on the air, some sort of general implications of our work, and we can go through that kind of list. But we still need a base ad to actually do this kind of A/B testing.
Right. So we have a question that's been sent in by Twitter. Do you think someday independent storytellers will have the ability to test their stories with these tools?
Absolutely. I think we're going there. I mean, for now, this is not an automated system. I wish it was, that we just watch a story and the data flow through. We are working on developing some technologies in which we could automate some or all of this. The difficulty is partially the algorithms. Again, most of the data we're getting is keeping you upright, so we have to sort of chuck that data out. And the second is that the sensors that pick this up are extraordinarily exquisitely tuned to get the data out of your brain. We're actually getting the data that's the output from your brain. That's just coming right out of your brain. So it's kind of integrated network data, and if you sweat too much, the sensors lose touch. But anyway, we're working on that. Wouldn't it be great to have a turnkey where I buy a piece of $100 software and I can just test this, say, on the web or in a room with people? So we're definitely going there. It'll get better.
I can see it now. It's going to be built into my Nike Plus wristband, and Nike will be tracking it.
Well, let's go one step further. Let's go. So it's in your wristband, and you're, say, watching TV or watching the internet, and then if, say, you opt in to let someone get that data, it'll say, hey, Charlie, would you like to have 2/3 fewer ads today? But we're going to send you ads that we think you're really going to care about based on how tired you are, how hungry you are, whatever. So what you hope is that I'm not going to get, it's not 6 o'clock, I haven't had dinner, and I'm sending you ads for junk food. I mean, we want to control for that. But on the other hand, I think personally, I wouldn't mind opting in to get ads that I think are really engaging to me, make me laugh, make me cry, whatever, and yet, are relevant to something I might purchase. By the way, the Barn Sister ad, I was talking to my little 12-year-old daughter last night, and I said, hey, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. Just watch this ad. It runs 60 seconds. And I've seen this ad a lot of times because we studied it in the laboratory. And I watched it, and I was just sitting there with my kid, and I started crying. Right? It's such, when you really pay attention to it, it's such a compelling ad. And my daughter's like, oh, Dad, you're an embarrassment. But it's really well thought out. So again, whoever did this was really on their game. and we're just kind of parsing out why it works so well.
Paul, are you at all worried about there being some backlash from the creative community? I mean, I know that there have been discussions about computer programs, or the idea that artificial intelligence might start to predict which types of stories will be most successful, or that big studios will only take films that test well with certain kinds of, again, scientific programs that are proving them to be likely to succeed, and that a lot of people in the creative community are very worried about the loss of the creative muse, the artistic inspiration. Do you think that could be something that happens here?
Great question. And I think the neuroscience answer is no, that we need the creatives. So I'll tell you why, then I'll give you an example. So the reason why is that in this kind of lazy brain metaphor that I'm pitching, we acclimate pretty quickly to stories that we've seen before. At some level, it's nice to rewatch a movie a couple times if you really like it. But for ads, is that kind of very intense short-form storytelling, and what we find is this sort of oversaturation. So that means that I need creatives who can do something different and relevant to the future of storytelling, include things like immersive ads or choose your own direction of the story, right? All that's really engaging for the brain. We want to be engaged by stories. Stories are part of our social nature. That's what we've really found. It's a deep part of our evolutionary history of our brain, activates evolutionary old brain areas. So we want story. We live for story. It's important to us. But we also live for new stories. Now, there's a larger philosophical issue. Are there any new stories? Are they all kind of, mythology?
Yeah.
So there may be some universal story forms, but within that form, there are much different stories to be told. Can we agree on that? So in this study that we talked about recently, we used a couple of very well-known ads as controls, and one of those was the VW ad, The Force. It's the kid who's pretends like he's Darth Vader, and then he's trying to make things happen. Remember this famous ad, and then his father pushes the remote. Yeah, it's great. It's a great ad. And guess what? We thought, oh, this is a great control. It's a wonderful ad. No one paid attention. I think everyone had seen it in our study, and it just didn't do anything. So I think that's good news for the people creating ads, that either the story can be different or the medium can be different. It can be fully immersive. By the way, I was testing out, Samsung is working on some, potentially, it hasn't been released yet, but potentially $200 or $300 virtual reality goggles. And a friend of mine's beta testing them, and they're amazing. And that's a very immersive technology. So to the extent that I'm more immersed, that my attention is more sucked into this story, I think the story is going to be more compelling. So the technology will be important, the types of stories, the way I tell them, all that I think is going to be highly engaging. And it's not like we're being forced to find these stories. I don't see movie sales going down. I don't see book sales going down. If anything, we're getting more and more stories in our lives all the time.
That's very true. And on that very nice and optimistic note, I think our time is just sort of coming to an end, and I wanted to thank you, Paul, for the work that you do, for the research that you do, and the contribution you're making to our understanding of story and the role it has in our lives. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to get to spend some time talking with you. So I wish you all the best. I look forward to having you come back and join us for some of the other Hangouts. As I mentioned, we do them every week, and we have a great lineup of speakers coming. And of course at the summit in the fall, October 7th and 8th. So again, thanks so much for your time today, Paul. It's really fascinating to hear about your recent work, and can't wait for more.